What makes a good story in video games? Is it the characters you meet, the worlds you explore, the mysteries you uncover, the drama you get mixed up in, the intense action? Well, there's no one way to make or tell a good story. I think it goes without saying that Destiny's storytelling has been a mixed bag for most Guardians. We've had some good beats with The Taken King, Rise of Iron, and Within the Grimoire, but Destiny 2 and Curse of Osiris have both come and left players, myself included, incredibly underwhelmed. And while the upcoming expansion Warmind does look promising from a gameplay perspective, it's done nothing to reassure me about the future of Destiny's narrative. What are the writers doing wrong? And how can they avoid the mistakes they've been making in their stories to come? I think the best way for me to illustrate what's wrong with Destiny storytelling is to take the vanilla story of Destiny 2 and revise it myself. But it's not just as simple as restructuring some lines, cutscenes, or mission orders. You see, video games are unique in that you're creating an experience that people play. And in Destiny's case, it's very much a game about progression, becoming more powerful, becoming legend, you might say. It's a game about hope. Hope to reclaim our worlds, to rediscover our lost history, to learn more about our enemies and allies, to discover what exactly is our destiny. One of the very first things that happens in Destiny 2 is that Guardians lose their connection to the Traveler and its light, the source of their powers. It's a huge and major moment that makes players realize that we're not invincible. And really, it's the first time we experience true failure in Destiny. This is such a good foundation for the rest of the story and game as a whole that, sadly, never goes beyond that first 30 to 45 minutes, because in the next mission, you investigate a broken shard of the Traveler and immediately reclaim your connection to the light. The rest of the game is business as usual, which is incredibly heartbreaking.
Do you feel it? The light is back. We're back. Eyes out, Guardian.
It's hard to feel like there's anything at stake when the game basically says that you're the luckiest, most overpowered hero of the story, that you can't possibly fail because it's your destiny to succeed. That's not all of the problems with Destiny 2's story. When telling a story, it's important that all of your narrative pieces come together by the end, that they all feel connected in some way. With Destiny 2, there's a lot of disconnect with the characters, the locations, and even the enemy races that you're facing. What purpose do characters like Devrim Kay, Sloan, Failsafe, and Asher Mir serve to the larger picture? For what reason does Nessus need to exist when a location like Io could fulfill the same role, if not do it better? Should something like the Almighty be brought up this early in the story, or do we save that for later as a much bigger surprise and threat? These are the types of questions Bungie needs to be asking themselves as they build their stories going forward. One thing they especially need to consider is the idea that less is more. They already have a large cast of characters from the original Destiny, most of which aren't being utilized when they very well could be. Again, why should I care about Sloan or Asher Mir? What roles do they serve to the plot that's so important for them to be included over characters like Aphrodite or Eris Morn? If they're just going to be planetary vendors, then you should rewrite the story so that they have more influence or remove them from the game entirely. It'd make much more sense for Eris to be in place of Sloan, studying the Hive's activity on Titan. Shiro 4 could be on Nessus in addition to Failsafe, ensuring that the Fallen don't find any Siva remnants or other Golden Age tech on the Exodus Black. This is a very basic writing rule known as Chekhov's gun. The rule states that every element of a story should contribute to the whole of said story by the end. To quote, "If in the first act you have hung a pistol on the wall, then in the following one it should be fired. Otherwise, don't put it there." This is true with anything, not just inanimate objects. Characters, settings, drama, they should abide by this rule. It's strange, because it's something Bungie used to be incredibly good at when they were developing Halo. Halo was basically the gun, and Bungie finally used it in the third game to defeat the Flood, as was its intended purpose. Thus, all the lore and build-up surrounding it saw closure. Now that I've given you some things to think about, I want to go ahead and talk about what my revised version of Destiny 2 story would look like. Firstly, the story would start off the same way. Ghaul and his Red Legion attack the last city, strip us of the light, capture the speaker, we meet up with Hawthorne and her refugees, and that's mostly all that stays the same. Secondly, and before we continue, the overarching narrative is going to be retuned so that it focuses on progression and desperation. The European Dead Zone. We're going to refocus the story in the EDZ to be less about reclaiming our connection to the light, though that still will play a role, and more on protecting the refugees. First mission will have us secure the farm, clearing out fallen scavengers and setting up defensive emplacements along the perimeter. Remember, we don't yet have our powers back. This will require players to use more guerrilla warfare tactics and make them more aware of their surroundings. Second mission will take us into the heart of the EDZ. Here, we'll meet Devrim Kay, who will task us to find, guide, and protect civilians who are on their way to the farm, some of which are equipped with weapons, and who can and will die along the way. The next mission will finally have you making your way to the Shard of the Traveler. Here, you'll regain some of your connection to the light. You'll be able to use your jump, grenade, and melee abilities, but your super is still locked away. Your ghost will also be able to revive you once again. After this mission, you'll gain access to the general patrol and landing zones in the EDZ. You'll do one more mission, which will basically remain the same as it is now. Help Hawthorne re-establish a connection to the command network so that you can communicate with any other survivors within the system. I also want to note, after you regain your connection to the light, your ghost will have a line that makes mention of when you first enter a respawning restricted zone. Something to the effect of, "Guardian, I must warn you, my connection to the Traveler is fading here. I won't be able to revive you." This is to help remind the player that just because they got some of their life back, they're still not invincible.
Guardians, the city is lost. If there is any light left in the system, we rally on Titan. Be brave. Guardians.
Zavala's alive. If we leave now, we can...
You are not going to Titan. We've got refugees coming in, the Red Legion on one side, the Fallen on the other.
But we have our powers back. And if we're going to retake the city...
Your city is gone.
Hawthorne, we will be back. And we won't be alone.
You'll know where to find me.
Titan. The purpose of this location is to rendezvous with Zavala, Amanda Holiday, Sloane, and other fellow Guardians. First mission is basically the same. Second mission will involve finding weapons and ammunition for the fleet. During this mission, Ghost will ask Sloane some personal questions in a way to help make her more relatable to the player. The third mission will involve us fighting alongside Sloane and other NPC Guardians as we push through Hive territory to acquire a Golden Age power cell to repower the fleet. A portion of the fleet will remain on Titan to keep an eye on the Hive while the rest aid in securing the farm back on Earth. Nessus. In making this rewrite, it was too difficult for me to justify the inclusion of Nessus in the story. Thus, Nessus and Failsafe have both been omitted. Sorry for any Failsafe fans.
I am the Exodus Black's failsafe. Call me failsafe. I boosted the Cade 6's signal in hopes he would be rescued. And look, here you are.
Oh, I see. She's just an AI. A malfunctioning AI.
I heard that. At your service.
EDZ Part 2. I suggest returning to the EDZ for a few reasons. One being that Earth is supposed to be the primary setting of the game. The second, that if Hawthorne is going to be the new major character, then we need to spend as much time with her as possible. So in the next mission, Devrim will tell us that Hawthorne went out on a scouting run and has yet to come back. We'll go and find her and learn exactly why she's so rebellious against the city's rules. How she wants to be able to explore beyond the walls and discover what human civilization was like before the collapse. We'll also learn more about her relationship with Devrim Kay. Io. Io is a very interesting location in Destiny 2, and I've spent a lot of time repurposing it in this revised story. It's the last place the Traveler touched before it settled on Earth, above the last city. Before we start, I'd like to point out that since Nessus is no longer a part of the story, development time would be spent to make Io a much larger and in-depth location than it actually is. In the original story of Destiny 2, we find Ikora, who seems to have been dealing with a heavy emotional toll as a result of losing her light and fearing that she may die her final death. I still wish to keep that narrative intact, but we're going to bring Cade 6 into the mix in place of Asher Mir. When we arrive on Io, Ikora will note that Cade was originally with her but left some time ago. She wants us to find him.
I came for answers. I stand here, still, with nothing.
Ikora, Zavala is forming a resistance, and he believes...
What good is a resistance when you are the only one who would survive? I believe this Ghoul creature knows the Traveler blessed this site. I believe he sent his legion to find something they could never possibly understand. And I believe they will continue to desecrate all we hold sacred. Save this place, Guardian. Do not squander this second chance.
Similar to what happened on Nessus in the original version of the story, we find that Cade has gotten himself trapped in a Vex teleportation network. Obviously we'll free him, and he'll get his Vex teleporter. The next mission is going to involve the Taken, and be mostly the same as it was in the actual game, just with more Cade. The mission following is going to mix things up, however. Ghaul has arrived on Io to oversee the excavation mission of the Traveler's Light. We see this as an opportunity to take him out. Unfortunately, we will fail. But in the process, we'll finally unlock our super ability, though it's in a very unfinished and weakened state. This is also the first time the Almighty will be brought up. Ikora says she'll look into it, and everyone decides it's time to make preparations for a final assault against the Red Legion.
Now that we are together again, we just might stand a chance.
The fact is...
The last unsafe city. It's finally time. We've gathered as many good fighters as we can. It's time to take back our city and free the Traveler. We will kill Ghaul. The difference here is that we'll have caught him before he's absorbed any of the Traveler's light. At the end of the mission, a cutscene will play where Ikora will be accessing various systems on Ghaul's command ship. This is where we'll discover what and where the Almighty actually is. Also, instead of dying as we assume he did in the original story, we'll learn that the Consul is still alive and now the one in charge. The Almighty. This is the last mission, the climactic conclusion. Zavala, Ikora, and Cade took a beating in the previous fight, so in their place, Hawthorne and Amanda Holliday will be the ones aiding us. All is essentially the same until we reach the reactor. Here, we'll encounter the Consul, except he's infused himself with the Traveler's Light that was harvested from Io. We lose, and the sun blows up. The end. Okay. That's not really how this story ends, but I'm sure I had you going there for a second. But that actually does happen, and it needs to happen. Why? Well, remember one of the first things Gaul said to us at the beginning of the game?
You're not brave. You've merely forgotten the fear of death. Allow me to reacquaint you.
This line is true. Until that point, we have mostly been unstoppable. Sure, we can die, but we always respawn. Death was more of an inconvenience to us rather than something we truly concerned ourselves with. To have us lose and, for just a moment, believe it's truly the end for us and the rest of the characters we've grown attached to would be a monumental moment in Destiny. So the sun blows up and begins consuming our solar system. How do we come back from this? Well, just as all seems lost, the Traveler finally awakens, frees itself from its cage, spreads its light, and somehow manages to reset time moments before our sun collapses. This newly freed light touches us and completes our subclass. In fact, there's so much light that we're put into an overcharge mode that gives us unlimited super duration, which we then use to defeat the console and destroy the Almighty just in time. The ending of the game remains the same. I had a discussion with a friend of mine recently. He's a pretty big critic of Destiny, though justifiably so. I asked him some questions as to what he feels needs to happen in order for the game to be interesting enough for him to want to play it every so often. We both came to a couple conclusions. Destiny has a lot of interesting background lore. The hunt of the Ahamkara, otherwise known as Wish Dragons, the battle of the Twilight Gap and Six Fronts, the collapse, and the Dark Ages, the origin stories of the weapon known as Thorn. These stories are wrapped in wonder, excitement, and fantasy. It tickles the imagination and makes me want to see one of those moments, to partake in those types of moments. The unfortunate fact of the matter is that it's reduced to background lore. They're merely things that you'd read in the Grimoire or occasionally hear whispers of from NPCs. Why is that? Why are some of Destiny's most interesting, arguably its most well-crafted moments, not playable? Why can't I fight alongside characters like Zavala, Cayde, or Lord Shaxx against a fleet of Fallen as they rush to break the walls keeping the last city and its civilians safe? Why can't I hunt creatures and monsters that have an almost mythological air surrounding them like the Wish Dragons? I remember Destiny being touted as a blend of sci-fi and fantasy, or mythic sci-fi as it was put. While it has certain fantasy-inspired elements, it's mostly sci-fi, and I think that's a huge mistake and misuse of talent. Just taking a look at some of the game's early concept art, it's clear that Bungie has a lot of talented artists and designers who can very well nail that fantasy aspect. But it's one thing to be able to design something that looks cool, it's another thing entirely to give that thing context to make it even cooler. Something Bungie has been very hit and miss with in Destiny. Mostly miss. Background lore is nice to have. It provokes interest in the possibilities in the world you create. But it shouldn't come at the cost of a good, upfront story. I don't want to feel like each mission is another fetch quest or kill X dude because he's mean and stole my favorite pair of shoes. Give your players context. Make them feel like they're serving a greater purpose. Make things feel at stake. However, and as I said at the beginning of the video, one of the best things Destiny 2 did was it finally let us experience defeat, albeit briefly. Keep doing that. Keep doing that. There's no fun in always winning. We also need to lose. It keeps us off balance and makes each victory more meaningful. Don't be afraid to have allied characters die an unquestionable death. After all, what point is a theme about hope if you can too easily predict the outcome?
Together we can show the world what we can do. We have found strength that we never knew. You've given me a reason to feel shine. God, if the world falls around us, think and take my hand and we'll go and trust. With you beside me, we'll make it through. All alone, we will never be. The two of us are holding the key. We see today a world we couldn't see. And with you I have found myself. Now there's no somehow.
That does it!